Well, the famous fight promoter Bob Arum was a huge figure in Ali's glory years, working with him from the 1960s, and he joins us on the line now. Good evening, Bob. You worked very closely with him for an extremely long time. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the man that you knew so well.
Yeah, Julian, thank you very much. I became Ali's promoter and attorney in 1965 after an introduction by American football great Jim Brown. The first fight that we scheduled for Ali was against Ernie Terrell in Chicago, and that's when Ali's draft classification was changed from 1Y, meaning unfit for service, because Ali could not, at that point, not read or write, and was changed to 1A, making him eligible for service. He was interviewed on television and said, I got nothing against the Viet Cong. They never used the N-word about me, and I'm not going into service. As a result of that, we got thrown out of the city of Chicago. The Terrell fight, which we tried to move it. Every city in the United States, everyone turned it down. I ended up in Montreal. The mayor agreed, and then he changed his mind when the American Legion threatened to boycott a World's Fair in Montreal that was to occur the following year. We were approached by the owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. At that point, Terrell, because fighters in those days were paid on percentage, pulled out of the fight. Chuvalo substituted, and Ali and Chuvalo fought in March of 1966. We were desperate at that time, and just as President Roosevelt came to the aid of Winston Churchill and the people of the United Kingdom prior to the Second World War, so did the people of the United Kingdom, the promoters, come to the aid of Muhammad Ali. We got an offer to come to fight Henry Cooper at the old Arsenal Stadium. Remember, we were all pariahs in the United States. We arrived in London in the morning. Those flights left in the evening and arrived early in the morning. We slept for a couple of hours, and then we came out a hotel in Piccadilly Square. And there we were greeted by 5,000 English people shouting Ali's name. And you cannot believe the encouragement that that gave us. Pariahs in our own country greeted so enthusiastically by people in London. We went on to fight Henry Cooper in London, and then the other promoter, Jack Solomon, signed Ali to fight Brian London a few months later. And then through the help of English promoters, we went to Germany, Frankfurt, Germany, to fight Karl Mildenberger. At that point, Judge Hoffheinz, who owned the Houston Astrodome, called me and said, you bring Ali into Texas to fight in the Astrodome, and I will protect him. And he did. And Ali fought Cleveland Williams later that year. And in 1967, Ernie Terrell. And finally, he fought Zora Foley in Madison Square Garden, where he knocks Foley out. And at that point, the day came when he refused to step forward to be inducted into the U.S. military, and he lost his license in every state. He was convicted by the United States District Court, a conviction which the U.S. Supreme Court years later overturned. But it was the resolute help that we got from the English boxing community that absolutely saved Ali's career at that point. True, after that 3.5 years, he couldn't fight. But then in 1970, a U.S. district judge said that his license couldn't be denied by the New York State Athletic Commission, even though he had been convicted. He got his license back. He had fought Jerry Quarry in Atlanta and fought Oscar Bonavena in Madison Square Garden in New York. December of 1970, and that led to the famous first fight with Joe Frazier.
Bob, absolutely fascinating to hear you talk about those times, and you were obviously so close to him during that. I mean, it must have been incredibly turbulent and incredibly difficult.
It was incredibly difficult, but you have to understand the historical context where the support of the English fans, the English public, the English British boxing board, the British promoters really restored us and righted the ship for at least another year and a half.
And what about in terms of his international reach? You've talked about the British fans there. What about around the globe and the impact that he had elsewhere outside the States?
Well, really, we had no reason at that particular point to believe that he would make an impact around the world. It started in England. It then, after the 3.5 years that he couldn't fight, built up he became a world figure. So that when he came back in 1970, and after the Fraser fight, we had him fight in Dublin, Ireland against Blue Lewis, in Jakarta, Indonesia against Rudy Lubbers, in the Philippines against Joe Frazier, in Kuala Lumpur, the second fight with Joe Bugner. People around the world couldn't get enough of him. But you have to understand how down we were back in 1966, how we felt pariahs in our own country, but we were uplifted by the reception we received in London when he came over to fight Henry Cooper.
Well, absolutely fascinating. Obviously, it's tough times, you know, on the day that his death has been announced. But, I mean, are you able to put into words how you will remember the man?
I remember the man. I remember, you know, so many personal things about him. How generous he was, how caring he was, how he meant and related to people. I mean, there are stories of his interaction with people when he fought Cooper, when he fought London. I remember a particular incident where he was getting ready to fight Brian London, and he told me that this extraordinarily wealthy Muslim, Pakistani, had invited him to go over to the house for Sunday dinner. And he asked if I would go along. And I said, yeah, sure, I would, you know, go with him. And we had the car take us, and we were in a very poor neighborhood in London. And I was sort of shocked because this was supposed to be an extraordinarily wealthy man. But we came up to the house, and it was a small house, and the man really was anxious for Ali there because he had a daughter, and he wanted Ali to meet his daughter. But Ali really treated the guy like he had a palace, and we took turns sitting around the table and eating because table couldn't hold all of us. And there was a little piano there, and Ali went to the piano and played the piano, and he was charming. We stayed there for 2 and 3 hours. And when we left, I said, Muhammad, this guy really pulled a fast one on you. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, he told you how rich he was, and he wanted you to come over. And Ali said, that may be so, but I had a wonderful time, and I feel so wonderful that I went over and made this man's life and that of his family a happier time. I mean, he was an extraordinary person.
Bob, a wonderful story, and thank you very much indeed for sharing that with us tonight. It's been absolutely splendid to speak to you. Thanks so much for your time.
I'm very happy to speak to you.